All right. Well, welcome everybody and good afternoon. So my name is Kevin Lautz, Director of Construction Management at the Chancellor's Office. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about the Subsurface Utility Mapping Master Enabling Agreement and one of our partners, which I'll introduce here in a few moments. So for those of you that aren't aware, we have had a Master Enabling Agreement in place for the past few years for subsurface utility mapping. And the main reason for that is some of the actions within subsurface utility mapping, such as like potholing or daylighting, usually need to be done underneath a construction contract. So I think because of that, there's been a barrier for campuses that function doesn't always occur prior to a project. And it's usually more challenging to happen during phase one of the contract because you have to set up a kind of a limited scope construction agreement. So what we did is we went out to the industry and asked around and requested proposals from a handful of different firms that can provide different levels of subsurface utility mapping, anywhere from basic, sites investigation, as well as doing different mechanical methods, and then all the way down to like potholing, to where we get the exact locations of utilities. And what we've seen is on a bunch of projects where that don't have the proper investigation, we're blowing through our project contingencies almost before we get out of the ground. So the major kind of factor of why we're really going to push to do the subsurface utility mapping prior to construction is to avoid those unknowns and make sure that all those utilities and POCs are part of the documents or can be contemplated to be included into the design to make sure that they're in the GMP if it's done through a collaborative design build. So I'll kind of kick off and show where those contract resources are, a little bit on how to utilize those resources. And then I'll hand it over to one of our partners to go through some more information about the specific services. So if you have any questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. This one will be a little different than some of our other presentations. We're not going to bore everybody from just clicking through a slideshow. We're going to jump around, do some screen shares, and really show you kind of the deliverables and some other information. So we do want to address questions as we go, and we will have some time at the end for more discussion and questions. But the main thing, or the primary point that I want to repeat over and over is once you know you have a project, at the same time you're doing the geotech and the survey, subsurface utility mapping should be on that list of activities that are done right away. And that way, if there are issues that are going to cause costs down the road, it's better to be aware of those costs and include them in the budget so they're not your contingency. Because as you guys know, we're going to need those contingency dollars for a multitude of other things. So to run out of contingency in the underground just isn't going to help out the project very much. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and show you guys how to find these agreements. So I'm going to jump over to our homepage. And on our homepage, if we jump over to the hub, this is kind of where we have all the miscellaneous type information that doesn't follow through, one of the other paths on the website. But up at the top right is where we have our agreements and master enabling agreements. So if you click that one, here's all the MEAs. And at the very bottom, not that it's the least important, I think it was just the last one that was added. We have the Systemwide Subsurface Utility Mapping Master Enabling Agreements. So this talks a little bit about what these services are, and then ultimately the firms that we currently have contracts with. We did have a third company, but they haven't renewed. So we will be going out and soliciting a third company to get that contract renewed as well. But we have the proposals, the executed MEA, the rate sheet, contact information, the current insurance. And then since we did previously have these contracts, we do have the original webcast recordings, which are a little more slideshow and presentation. So this won't really be a duplicate of that. But we will be posting this video as well on this page. So you can go through and see the information. And once you know you have a project that requires subsurface utility mapping, I would recommend contacting both the companies or even all three once we have them available. So you can talk about scope and schedule because, everybody's really, really busy right now. So you might find a company that's going to have a better schedule that fits what your construction schedule is at your specific location, but you won't really know until you talk to everybody. So I'd recommend reaching out. And then once you do reach out and find, select which company is going to be able to meet your needs at your schedule, then you can look at the specific rate sheet, and the rate sheet can be used as a basis to negotiate the service order. And then the service order template is part of that executed MEA. So let me go ahead and pull that open. So here's the service order template. So part of that template, once you discuss with the service provider, you'll talk about kind of what level of investigation and deliverables that you want to do. And our partner's going to discuss that here in a little bit. Also, which kind of cost method. So is it going to be a fixed amount, or are you going to track it on T&M? Is it going to be directly off the fee schedule? So really, it's up to you to choose the basis or the cost basis for the contract, depending on what makes sense for the specific project that you have. And you can issue multiple service orders as well. So if you want to do an initial service order just to do some investigation to help come up with the scope on what level or how much further that we need to go with the investigation, you can do that as well. So it can be one service order, it can be multiple service orders. Each service order can have a different basis of costs. So that's all up to the campus to negotiate. And then between this agreement and the master enabling agreement, basically has all the contract terms in place to be able to perform these services. So you don't need to go out to bid, doesn't need to be advertised. All that's already been done. So really, it's just a matter of negotiating the service order, which basically acts as the notice to proceed for that project. So relatively easy and low barrier. So this can be done prior to construction. It can be done early in phase one if you really wanted to, but ideally it's done right before, once you have a project. And let me see if I want to dive into any of the other attachments. So here's an example of a rate sheet. So based on the negotiation on what the project needs are, you get hourly rates for the different personnel, the pieces of equipment that you might use, and then data collection. But ultimately, these will just be used to kind of help negotiate whatever that cost is going to be for the project. All right, so with that, I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions on the agreement before I hand it over. So if you want to throw it in the chat or unmute and ask a question, I'll give you 10 more seconds. All right, good. Well, that's self-explanatory. So with that, I'm going to go and hand it over to one of our partners, Matthew Fitzgerald from McCarthy Building Companies. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Kevin. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate you all being here today. I'm excited to talk with you about our services, our capabilities, the things that we have provided for CSU in the past, and the things that we're looking forward to providing in the future. Like Kevin said, we've had an MEA in the past, and you'll see some of the jobs and campuses that we've worked on previously. He also showed you the link to the previous presentation or recording that we did, I think, Kevin, 2 years ago at this point, maybe even 3 years ago. And so some of you may be familiar with some of the bones of that. And so that really this will be kind of a revisit to some of the things you may have heard there. Like Kevin said, we're going to be kind of hopping around pretty quickly to some of the things that we are doing. I want to get you all some hands-on experience with the deliverables that we do provide, so that you can all see how those packages work and how that might implement into y'all's projects. So with that, I'll start with an introduction. Matthew Fitzgerald with the mapping group within McCarthy. Of course, McCarthy, big general contractor, as you all know. I just work with the mapping team. I lead the business development efforts for our team. I'm a civil engineer by trade, spent about 5 years designing roads and bridges for a civil engineering firm in St. Louis, Missouri, and then made the switch over to the construction side, managing mapping work for about 3.5 years, and then swapped over to the business development side as we look to grow our service outside of what McCarthy is doing, and more so direct to owners and clients across the country. So like I mentioned, I'm still based in St. Louis, Missouri, wife and 4 children, and really enjoying the mapping component as well. Whitman, I'll kick it over to you, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Sounds good. Good to meet you, everybody. Thanks for being here and sharing some time with us. I'm Andy Whitman. I'm the SoCal Ops Manager. Been with McCarthy for about 2.5 years now, and just was brought in to kind of spearhead the ops here in SoCal. So I'd be the point of contact for basically any project that probably you guys would be working on locally. And based out of San Diego and do work throughout Southern California. So
perfect. Thanks, Andy. All right, we'll go ahead and start sharing screens as well. Let's see here. So I dropped 2 websites into the chat. Let me go ahead and get some of y'all's faces back here in front of me. Dropped 2 websites in the chat. The first one is what we're looking at now. It's kind of our main website that gives a little bit more of detail into how we do what we do, our processes, our deliverables, the technology we use. We're going to hit a couple of those, but just dropped it in there for reference. The second one with the -CSU on the end is kind of a portfolio of the work we have done with CSU directly. And so once again, we'll hit that really quickly here in a little bit. But wanted to start with a history of our group specifically and really the reason why we're here. Like I mentioned, McCarthy Building Companies has been around for over 150 years, building on some of the most complex and congested sites in the country, right? They're working on healthcare campuses, higher ed campuses, airports, data centers, downtown environments, things like that. And so you can imagine they're hitting utilities all of the time. And so about 10, 11 years ago, they kind of had a group of people that were set aside to essentially help not hit utilities. That's kind of what the committee was formed with one thing in mind: just don't hit utilities. Try to find a way to do that. And so our subsurface utility mapping group was formed at that point. They started developing a team and developing a process that helped mitigate that risk. And for, I'd say, the first, 6 to 7 years, the primary focus of what we were doing was only on McCarthy. And that's all we cared about. We just wanted to make sure McCarthy was protected on the jobs that they worked on. We then started to kind of accept some work a little bit more that came in the door based on recommendations and clients that had experienced our deliverables through a McCarthy project. And we started doing that around the country. And then I'd say the last 1.5 years, we've really begun to pick our head up and make efforts across the country to make people aware of our services, to build networks, to build and grow relationships around the country as well. And so that's where a lot of this started. Kevin, with you and your team and CSU, that 3-4 years ago, where we wanted to do just that. We wanted to kind of expand to, like Kevin said, get our product and get our deliverables into the project lifecycle earlier, right? We wanted to start seeing it getting utilized in early planning, in master planning, in the early parts of design, to have this accurate information. And so we've really started to put some serious effort into that over the last 1.5 years or so. But I will say that this is one of our biggest differentiators. So we started in St. Louis as a small group, and we've kind of grown across the country to support all regions of the country, pretty much all over the place. But one of our biggest differentiators, and I hope you see this as we move towards seeing the deliverables, but one of our biggest differentiators is being born out of a construction company. And the reason I say that is because we had the first several years of our existence to develop a process and a deliverable package that truly met the needs of the people putting work in place, right? We were providing a service earlier on, where we would hand over information and our, excuse me, hold on just 1 second. Let me get a drink. Coughing too much. We were handing over data to where our own partners would walk down the hall to our cubicles and bang on our walls and say, listen, this isn't good enough. We need you to take it a step further. And we had years and years of that. We had years of them coming to us and say, hey, this is great, but we would love for you to show it to us this way. And so we have developed a package here that, once again, we'll get through here quickly, that I feel this is where my business development kind of salesy pitch will come through. I feel is the most accurate and reliable deliverable you can get in the country. And I feel very strongly about that because of those years and years we put in developing a process and a deliverable that truly meets the needs. It goes above and beyond kind of the industry standard as far as the level of detail and information that you're getting. And so once again, I hope you all see that. Are you all seeing my screen okay? Perfect.
Yeah.
Good. Excellent. So we'll dive in. Yes.
That second website you didn't drop into the chat. I got the.
Oh, it's not in there.
But yeah, I didn't see the CSU portfolio one.
Okay, I'll drop it in here in a little bit. Or Andy, if it's really this, it's the same website, just dash CSU on the end if you want to drop it in.
Okay, perfect.
All right, so we'll hit just a couple points on this website before we jump over to a couple of the other windows about our field process and deliverables. I'm going to hit this why mapping section here quickly. Rather than us just saying, hey, listen, we want to provide really accurate deliverables, we tried to, we tried to break that down a little bit further into some buckets that we wanted to impact on the job and for the campus. And you can see those here, safety all the way through operations. Safety always being one of the most important things that we do here at McCarthy, always top of mind. Of course, we want to provide more accurate information to make jobs safer. I'm going to focus on two of them, and that's budget and schedule there in the middle. So people come to us all the time and they say, listen, Matthew, if we use your product, if we use your service, will my job get cheaper? Will the cost of my job go down? While out of one side of my mouth, I do want to say yes, I really think it will. And the reason I say that, Kevin and I were just talking about these metrics a couple of days ago. There's metrics all over the internet, and studies have been done, one specifically by the University of Purdue, about the savings that you recognize by doing subsurface utility mapping. And their results said for every dollar you spend, you'll save $4.62 on overall project costs. Now, that seems like a great number. It's also the lowest number of all the other studies on the internet. So there's one that shows 10, there's one that shows 18, and there's one that shows 20. For every dollar you spend on some services, you're going to recognize those levels of savings. Now, we have experienced those, not always to the $20 per dollar, right? But we are experiencing day in and day out the level of savings on our McCarthy jobs, as well as the jobs that we are working with owners direct, truly experiencing those lower cost values. Now, that's one side of my mouth. The other side that we really want to hone in here on budget and schedule, and Kevin, you alluded to it a little bit before, is that we want to provide cost and schedule certainty for you all very early, right? We want to provide information to you and your teams to where you know exactly what is going to be expected from a civil component. So you know exactly how much it's going to cost, and you know exactly how long it will take. And you know that before the job even starts, rather than 6 months, a year into the job through change orders. And so while I do believe you're going to experience efficiencies and just overall benefits across the board, the bigger thing that we want to really focus on is we want to bring certainty to the cost and the schedule component early on. And that's a big part of our why and what we are trying to do. This next component is our integrated mapping process. So if you think historically about underground utility mapping, it has widely been treated like a service provider, still is in a lot of ways. The team comes to the site, provides a service, gives a deliverable, and they're gone, right? You never really see them again. You kind of go about your business. You start digging on the site. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes you're finding different things, but really they're gone. And what we found, once again, in that early part of our kind of development phase, we realized that underground unknowns is one of the riskiest items facing our projects, right? I think we would all agree. And the mitigation strategies that were being implemented were not great. They were, paying a couple days of a locator and then leaving, or getting a deliverable and then sending that team away. And so we feel very strongly about this idea of an integrated process, to where we are, one, getting that information correct on the front end, but then that team is very involved all the way through the project life cycle, for that specific job. And the reason being is because then that team gets to protect and communicate that data all the way through the project lifecycle. It's a lot of data. We'll see that here in a minute. And it's really hard for project teams to take that in and communicate it really well without losing data along the way. And so our team loves to be a part of that process and protect it all the way through, to where when it gets to the field, it is unchanged. It's a single source of truth. There's been zero data loss the entire process. And then that gets handed over to you all at the end, to manage your campuses overall. So that's what this integrated mapping process is about. It's about protecting and communicating the data around underground unknowns very clearly, throughout that process. The standard of care, so you all saw that on the form that Kevin showed you, quality levels A, B, C, and D. We're going to talk about that on the deliverables when you're actually looking at it. But what that is everything we do is standardized by ASCE. They tell us how we are to depict utilities on deliverables. And so what that means is every line that we show has to have a quality level attached to it, which essentially gives it a grade of confidence for how it is depicted on the map. D is the least confident, all the way up through A being the most confident. We'll talk through more of what that means here in a minute. All right, so the technology is down here as well. You can click on these buttons and see more information about the 10 that we use in our group. I'm going to show you just the 4 that we use day in and day out, kind of our most popular, if you will. The first one is EM utility locators. That's what you see almost any locator on the side of the road using, very common. We use this to locate, I'd say, 65% of the utilities on a site. With this technology, we can directly connect onto utilities and trace it out, feel very comfortable about the horizontal location of utilities. We have CCTV trucks and push cameras that we can insert into sewers. We can see the condition of them, understand the location and the connectivity of them as well, develop reports if needed. We do have ground penetrating radar. This is a very common piece of technology in the utility locating industry. It's kind of a buzzword. Hey, come GPR my site, or hey, come do a day GPR, things like that. You all may have experienced this with GPR, but GPR is a very unreliable tool, and it yields incomplete data if it is the major technology used on the site. The 2 biggest reasons for that is soil conditions and water table levels. And so the biggest hindrance to GPR is due to those factors. Sometimes you're only seeing 1 foot, 2, 4, 6, 8 feet into the ground at any given time. And we all know how many more utilities can be located below those thresholds. And so if GPR is the kind of where you're putting all your eggs, then you're going to yield some incomplete data. We do use GPR still. The way that we implement it is typically the last piece of technology off of our trucks. And what we will do is we will get through our entire investigation and we will see, hey, the records are showing a water main over here. However, we can't locate it with our EM locator. We're not getting a good signal with our acoustic pipe locator, which we'll see here in a minute. Let's get the GPR out and check that one spot and see if we can pick it up. So it's more focused efforts rather than applying that technology across an entire site. Acoustic pipe locators are very similar to GPR. However, it is yielding better results in the same soil conditions. The only negative about it is it takes longer to gather the data. So rather than being able to, cut the grass with a GPR unit, you've got to take individual readings on a certain cross section and then move up, take it again. So it takes a little bit longer. However, it does yield some better results. Those are the four main ones that we use. The biggest takeaway that we talk to our clients about is that we do not own anything special. People ask us all the time, hey, what kind of technology did you have to get this as accurate as it is or look as good as it does? Nothing. We have no proprietary software or equipment. It truly is the way in which we implement the technology. So like I said, I keep saying those earlier years, we developed a process and how to implement technology based on the situation that is going to yield us the most accurate and reliable deliverable. The other differentiator is that we are hiring and typically employing 15, 20, 25 plus year utility designators. And so those are folks who understand how to troubleshoot bad signals, who understand how utilities are connected and installed in the field. That's going to take the accuracy and reliability and just knock it up a couple notches. So all of that, there's not a silver bullet technology that you're able to see everything. This is not a perfect service, right? This is not a 100% we're seeing everything in the ground. It is all about the process, not the technology that you have. And so keep that in mind. That's a really important thing. A lot of people always want to go after the newest technology and just take that across the site. And that's really going to leave a lot of risk on the table without a really tight process to go along with it. So that's the lead there with the technology. This bottom section talks about our deliverables. We're going to jump here and you can click on here. It'll show you videos, give a little description about them. So feel free to revisit this section later. We'll get on the actual, PDF documents and things like that and get an idea of what that looks like. But I'm going to stop there really quick and see if anybody has any questions before we jump and kind of hit our field process and the deliverables. All right, we'll go ahead and move forward. I'm not great at monitoring the chat, so Whitman, help me out there. But also, if you guys have questions, feel free to shout them out, interrupt me, no big deal. Okay, we're going to go ahead and switch over. I'm going to show you a little bit about the work that we've done at CSU. We're just going to really cruise through this, but it'll give you an idea of some of the campuses we worked on, some of the services that we provided, whether it be the different quality levels, things like that. This top section we're familiar with already. We've seen that. Then it goes into our experience. So you can see Fresno State, CSU Long Beach, CSU LA, Sac State, San Diego State, San Jose State, SFSU. Those are the campuses we've primarily worked on. You can see down here kind of where is the value. These are the things that we're looking to impact on your campuses and on your projects. So once again, safety, we're talking reduced redesigns, improved emergency response, accuracy with budgeting. This is that certainty that we talked about, less change orders, streamlined 811 response options, and then a single source of truth. We're talking about that single source of truth. I'm sure you all have experienced this before on your campuses where you have data in 17 different places and they all look a little bit different. So having this type of information and kind of setting this standard helps develop a single source of truth around the data that you want as kind of what everybody's gathering around. So it's also got some frequently asked questions and a little bit about our team. So feel free, jump back to this, ask me any questions at the end if you want to hone in on a specific project or part of the value.
So Matthew, you mentioned the 811 response, and
yes,
I guess better time than ever to address that there. So a lot of campuses, or a lot of just owners in general, they call it Dig Alert, and they say, well, Dig Alert comes out and maps my stuff, so why would I need additional services? So would you be able to talk a little bit about what Dig Alert does and how that's different than these services?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we would kind of run into that all the time where we're working with private and public areas. And clients will come to us and say, listen, we just want you to map the private because 811 will take care of all the public. And that once again leaves a lot of risk. And the reason, there's a couple factors of why, but if you all think about the 811 process, and I'm sure you all have had some good experience with 811, and I'm sure we all have some bad experiences, right? And some of the biggest reasons is 811 is a production-based outfit, right? Each locator is carrying around a big stack of tickets that they're trying to get done by the end of the day. And so they are just trying to crank them out as fast as possible. And so what that yields a lot of times is locators putting paint marks down based on records, based on old utility records rather than actually locating the utilities. So that leaves some risk out there, right? One of the other reasons is that they're typically only marking out active utilities. They're not marking out any of the abandoned utilities or conduits that aren't being used in. It's a job that they're able to walk into, get a little bit of training, and start locating utilities. And so while they are utilizing similar technology, they don't have the expertise to, once again, troubleshoot bad signals. And so if you total all that up, you're not getting exactly the product or the reliability that you want in those public marks that you really need when you're working so close to them. So that is why a lot of times our clients will lump both of them. They want us to locate the public and the private and take care of that risk across the board there. In addition to that, we've also worked with several campuses to help them get on the one-call system to be able to respond appropriately. So some campuses, both higher ed and healthcare, they're not even on the system to get alerted. So they just see people digging, 50 foot from their site and don't know anything about it. And so we've also worked with them to develop getting the notifications and then developing a process to respond accordingly with the information that we're providing. So yeah, take a look at these value propositions here. If there's one you want to circle back to later, feel free, ask any questions there. All right, let's talk real quick about our field process, and then I promise you we will be looking at some deliverables and we'll barrel through those. So a little bit about our field process. The first thing when we are getting into a site or looking at a specific area is to review all the available records, public, private. We're going to digitize them all, review them all, and get them into one spot so that we have an idea of what we might find on the site. After that, we then deploy our crew out on site and we begin the actual investigation. All right. And so this is us opening up every single available access point in regard to utilities, taking inventory of what's inside, and then beginning the hooking on and locating process of the utility itself. As a part of that inventory, we're gathering pictures, videos, notes, 360 pictures, dimensions, any data specific or special that you all are looking for, we can add that in. That's gathering a lot of data. We then will walk all the buildings that are in or around the site. I'm sure you all have utilities on your site that go from building to building and never come up to the surface. And so if we just focused on the site itself, we're going to miss those. So we go and verify all the wall penetrations. If we see a new one, we hook on, trace it out, and gather that information. What we then do is bring our survey team out to the site. We lock onto whatever coordinate system or control points you're using for your campus or the project itself. And we survey in all of the paint mark data and the location data. We then bring that back in-house, draft the 2D and 3D deliverables, whatever the team is needing, and we're able to kick those back out to the team. So this part here that I'm showing you is a part of our field process, documentation process. And so as the team is locating and inventorying utilities, they are drawing it on here with their little pins on their tablets and dropping in all the data, all the dimensions, pictures, videos, whatever it may be, so that this becomes almost kind of a mini GIS for your campus. So for those of you who have a GIS, all this information can be exported to that. For those of you who don't have a GIS, this becomes kind of a GIS light for you to manage all that data and have it very accessible. So for example, if you wanted to click on this sewer manhole, you can see that that's number 15. This is in service. You've got media attachments where you can look at the picture inside. You've got information about the flow lines and the material and the size, and when it was located and who took care of that. You can click on certain water mains and understand that that's quality level B. So that was we feel very confident about its horizontal location. We've got approximate depths, sizes of the lines, material, any other relative information about that. And this becomes, like I said, a GIS with all of that data in it. Now, the neat thing about this is it can be updated very easily. So I talk to a lot of clients who say, listen, we don't have the people, the time, the money to manage a full GIS by ourselves. I can tell you, I am not a smart guy when it comes to GIS, and I can manage this very easily. It's easy to take away lines, add a picture, change the route of something if it's relocated. It is very user-friendly without that Esri price tag that we see on a lot of products around the country. So really neat spot to hold a lot of the data for the field documentation. All right, that then, like I said, is surveyed and sent to our design department. They do all of their authoring in AutoCAD Civil 3D, and they create deliverables like the CAD file and then export it to PDF as well for use for the campus or project. Give you a little bit about the functionality of this one. It's very colorful, right? So blue, water, red, electric, and so on, just as you would expect. Everything is shown accurately sized. So that's duct bank sizes, vault sizes and orientation, as well as pipe sizes above 12 inches. This is critical, right? When you're trying to understand how much room you have around your campus and your sites to work and add utilities in or just do overall construction. Everything is shown layerized by utility type and quality level. And so if you did want to, let's see here, if you did want to just understand the electric and how that's being connected around your site, you can toggle those items on and off due to that layering structure there. To do a quick dive into the quality level so you understand kind of the data point that's brought along here, we can work through each one. So if you see this gray water main going right across the middle, it's a 6-inch water main QLD, quality level D. That means that we saw it on a record or utility as-built somewhere during our early initial investigation. However, it made its way through our entire site investigation without being found. There's no evidence of its existence. We're still going to show it to you on the map at quality level D grayscale. If you look at this sanitary main going at a diagonal 24-inch PVC QLC, QLC means we know exactly where it starts and we know exactly where the utility stops. However, we didn't or couldn't locate it in between. So we see that on a lot of sewers, right, where we know pretty sure that it connects in a straight line based on the records and what we're seeing in the site. We're not going to take the time and spend your money to put a piece of technology in the pipe and trace it to the surface and survey in that information to call it quality level B. We're just going to, boom, connect the dots and call it quality level C. Quality level B, what you'll notice on all these duct banks, electric, all these chilled water lines and gas lines, that means we hooked onto the utility, got a good signal, and we feel comfortable about its horizontal existence. That's where we recommend almost every single project we work on to get to quality level B, which is horizontal accuracy for the utilities. We will bring that 2D deliverable to the team and we'll say, okay, where do we need the quality level A? Based on what you all are doing on your campus, whether it be for FM operations, whether it be for a project, where do we need the quality level A data, which is where we're going to go use test holing and get the elevation of the utility. And so that's what we did with this. We set the 2D and they said, we need all these utilities here because we're going to be crossing them with our new electric duct banks. And so we did a test hole here, got all the elevations on that, reported that back in a table form as well as on the 3D model. And that information all gets updated to include that vertical information there. That is on the quality levels, it's a great data point rather than just looking at all the lines on the map thinking that they're all equal. You now are able to approach every single line with a little bit different strategy based on the quality level that's attached to it. If you're coming in conflict with a quality level B line, well, yes, you're going to need to do something about it. If you're coming in touch with a quality level D line, well, maybe there's some folks who know, hey, this was shown in an as-built years ago. It's been ripped out of the ground, or it was demolished back in the 80s, and you're able to just blow right past it. So it allows you to approach everything a little bit differently, having that information shown on each line. This hyperlink deliverable, I'll give you a little bit of view on how that works. So like I mentioned, we're gathering a lot of data in the field. We will show that or provide that to you in one of two ways. The primary way that most people want it is on the Subsurface maps, which is that GIS platform we were just looking at. Some people want it hyperlinked to the deliverable itself. And the reason I'll show you this is just because I have a report attached to this one. So I'll show you some of the data that we're able to gather. But if you did want to understand what was going on in this electric vault here, you can click on that. You can understand the butterfly diagram of what's inside. You can hover over any of the duct packages and understand the size, material, how many are empty, where they go. You have dimensional data here on the bottom. And then you have a 360 photo here in the middle. That's going to give you a look into what's going on inside that vault. This is critical information, once again, for early planning. Hey, do I have enough conduit capacity to not have to open trench new utilities to this new building? Can I utilize two of the empty conduits in here? Where can I punch into these existing vaults? You have the 360 views. You don't have to send teams out again and again to view inside vaults or take a look at certain portions of the site. You have it all here at the click of a button for that early planning. And then, of course, this becomes critical for the construction. If you have a team digging down on the duct bank attached to this vault, they know that they're not just looking for a duct bank, right? They're looking for 9 4-inch PVC conduits. That's what they need to look for. So many times the contractor will find 6, and those bottom 3 just happen to dip a little bit lower, and they miss them, right? With this type of information, they know, listen, we've got to keep looking. We're looking for 9 4-inch PVC conduits. And so that's how a lot of this information gets utilized in the construction as well as in the FM piece to just overall manage the campus and the infrastructure. All right, one of the other ones is our conflict analysis report. So like I mentioned, what we recommend is everybody get to quality level B, develop a 2D document. And then one of the things we do is we overlay any proposed designs on top of our map. What that will do is it allows us to see from a horizontal standpoint any conflicts or discrepancies based on what you all are trying to do on the site. So if we find a fiber that's going straight through a proposed footing, we're going to flag it, explain our concern for that and potential solutions. If we find 3 duct banks going up the road and your topographic survey only showed 2, we're going to flag it and explain the reason. So it's a way for us to do kind of a light constructability analysis with all of the information we found and provide that to you in a very user-friendly, easy to understand way. These two, the hyperlink deliverable, or at least all the data that we're gathering, as well as this conflict analysis report, these are items that I mentioned early that our teams, our own partners came back and say, listen, great data, there's a lot of it. Can you kind of take a look at what we're trying to do and see if there's any discrepancies out there that you could point out based on what you found? And so this is a way that, once again, we have built a process, a package that we feel meets the needs of construction teams and campuses more than what we've seen around the country. So this is kind of an example of going above and beyond the standard. Okay, I'll show you just a couple more items. So this is the 3D. I'll just do a quick fly-through video. So once we do the 2-dimensional exhibit, we review that, we develop the plan of where we need that quality level A information, we go gather it, we can then bring it back and develop a 3D model that, just like this, can be plugged up into the overall coordination model, whether it be the architect or the GC managing that process. They're now able to coordinate and run clash detection not only on the building and the MEP there, but on the external component and the proposed utilities on the site and the grading, the cuts and the fills to understand how that might impact existing infrastructure. And so it kind of brings together the two worlds of everybody who cares about the building and everybody who cares about outside of the building. And it brings those two worlds together to help coordinate the entirety of the project. All right, like I said, we're kind of cruising through the deliverables. Just wanted to kind of dump some of the things that we're able to provide. I'll show just two more things, I believe, and then we'll circle back up for some Q&A. But like I mentioned, this deliverable section here is this top component is what we've reviewed today for the most part. So you get your 2D CAD all the way through the different components that we've looked at. This bottom portion is a little bit more on the supplemental side, things that we can provide in addition to our typical package. GIS, georeference documents. This reality capture is something that I'll show you really quick. This is a way for us to do Google Street View for your campus. So I'm sure there's always parts of your campus that you all would love to drop in and see 360, but Google Earth doesn't allow you to because it's never been driven, right? So this allows us to walk the campus with a 360-degree camera and be able to show those routes and that information to you to where you can drop in at any point you want on your campus and look around 360. It can also be tied in with the 3D model and be able to see that perspective. And so we've seen this to be really valuable for owner engagement who I hear from owners all the time, hey, I hate looking at the 3D model with just a gray background. I don't know what I'm looking at or where this model is in space. Now you have a way to kind of see the real world side by side with it. And it has driven owner engagement higher on some of the projects that we've worked on because they can see that perspective and how it might impact the operations on their campus. What sidewalks are they going to have to close for the students? What lights are they going to have to remove? What walls are they going to have to shore up? And that gives a great perspective in that regard. There's also some really neat things going on with augmented reality. If y'all have more questions about that, I'd love to talk about it, but I won't spend any time right now. There's some really neat things that it used to be all just kind of play and salesy and kind of a cool toy. And they've taken some really impressive steps to make it truly impactful for campuses and projects. And so I would love to talk about that as we continue the conversation later. I'm going to just one last thing, and then we'll circle up for some questions here. So a lot of the things that we looked at today is kind of we'll call it the full mapping experience, right? Where you're doing the investigation, you're getting survey, you're getting nice deliverables, maybe a 3D model. And that's what we do for the most part. That's our bread and butter. That's where we feel we bring the most value, really. But I really want you all to know that this service, specifically with us, is very customizable. And so if you all looked at this and said, listen, I don't want the butterfly diagrams, I don't need the conflict analysis report, leave those off. Great, no problem. We can create a scope and a package that is truly what you want. If you don't want the 3D model, good, it's gone. If you all just wanted us to come and mark out utilities on the site and just provide locates on the site, just painting the ground for someone else to come and survey, absolutely. We give day rates for that. And so all the way from day locating, all the way through the deliverables that you're seeing now, there are 100 different options about how you could pick and choose the specifics of what you are specifically looking for and what your budget allows, what direction you want to take your campus and the information you want post-project, right? So keep that in mind. A lot of this, people look at it and say, that must be really expensive. And you're right, it costs some money, right? And there are ways to trim the fat and get something specifically that will bring value for you and your campus with the budget you have. So please keep that in mind. We are always available to talk strategy on, hey, what do you think with this budget would be the most valuable for us to utilize? We love having those conversations as well. The pricing component of our service is not a heavy lift. And so if you all have things going on in your campus, whether it be a project or just a tough area of congested utilities, feel free, shoot us over the area with some supporting utility information, and we'll put together a price for you really quick and shoot it back. And so if you just want those numbers kind of in your back pocket for budgeting or just so you can know, feel free, shoot anything over. We'd love to support in that way as well. So that's all we have. Like I said, we went through the deliverables really quick. We tried to hit a bunch of things so you can kind of see a lot. But does anybody have any questions about the overall service, specifics of the deliverable or process, technology, anything?
So Matthew, you mentioned, or you're just talking about, finding the right services that meet the strategy. So for all the experiences that you've had working with both McCarthy and other owner projects on vertical non-greenfield projects, what is the typical set of services, quality levels, and deliverables that you would say is typically performed or recommended on the average vertical project?
Sure, that's a great question. So the typical is the quality level B 2D exhibit. I'd say the 3D model component gets added on. Andy, what do you think? Maybe 60% of the time based on what they're trying to do? Yeah, I'd say 60% of the time. So typical package is you are doing a full quality level B investigation with a 2D utility exhibit. We typically provide that lump sum and go after it that way. And then almost always we are providing a quality level A allowance. So we'll provide an allowance, let's say a 30 grand allowance based on what we see you doing on the site. That is due to all the factors that go into quality level A work, how deep the utilities are, is it in pavement or grass? What's the backfill like? And so we can go at that scope T&M. But to answer your question directly, Kevin, it is quality level B with a 2D utility exhibit.
And then, so along with the deliverables, what is the timeline throughout the project, or I guess at what phase during project from inception through design development are you guys typically engaged to perform the services? Are you guys usually the first one on the site? Or you come on like immediately after McCarthy gets a contract, or do a lot of owners come out to you early so that they can put these documents in the RFP? What have you kind of seen?
Sure. So it really is all across the board. But, Kevin, like you and I were talking a couple of days ago, the ideal scenario is as early as possible, right? Because so many times the information we're providing is impacting not just design, but like building placement, right? Like master planning decisions and how those things are laid out. And so as early as possible is ideal, but the majority of the time we are getting brought in when the topographic survey is being completed. We're starting to see us getting involved earlier and earlier, just as we begin to talk to more people and develop those relationships. But if we are working alongside the surveyor who's providing the topographic survey, we're doing something right. We're gathering all that data at the same time. We're even sharing some services and kind of making sure we're not overlapping and doing double scope. That has been our best teaming situation there.
All right. And then we had a question in the chat. Do you map the cable feeder routes in the vaults? And I believe that is, you had the butterfly diagram that shows which conduits come out of each side, but where the conductors actually go from one set of conduits to the other. And Jeff, you can correct me if I'm wrong with that interpretation.
Jeff, any other clarification there? Is it written out in there, Kevin?
Yeah, it just says, do you map the cable feeder routes in the vaults? So yeah, it sounds like, so if, because you're showing the conduits, right? So you're showing which conduit's connected to which one, other than the photo.
We are not. We typically don't do that. So we're just locating what's going out the walls and showing that in this information. We have been asked to do that. We've done that before, to where we understand kind of every cable that's going from one spot to the next inside the vault itself. We have done that, I believe, just one time.
Yeah, and I would imagine since we're going to open the vault to put the camera in there anyways, it kind of depends on the project. So if it's a new project, where your goal is to not hit the conduits, then it doesn't necessarily matter as much what's in them. But if you're doing an electrical infrastructure project and you're trying to trace very specific conductors, I assume that we could hire you with that service in mind and say, hey, we're really interested on specifically where, this single kV line, comes in from the campus and then hits this transformer, in which case you could very specifically trace specific conductors, right?
That's exactly right. We actually just did this scope for UC Davis Medical Center up in Sacramento. They wanted to know the conduit numbers and the cable numbers on every single thing inside the vault, and know, does it go from this conduit and then reaches over and goes out the wall in this conduit. So that'd be our best scenario. We didn't self-perform the actual getting inside the vault and getting that information. However, we did self-perform all the data gathering and developing of the deliverable package. We can definitely do that. Yes.
Awesome. All right. We got 2 minutes left for one or two more questions. Does anybody else have a question? All right. Well, seeing none, I just want to thank Matthew and the rest of the McCarthy team for coming out. Appreciate all your time and appreciate everybody else's time for joining us. And then I'll turn it over to Tim to give us kind of the final wrap up.
First off, I want to thank everybody for the presentation and for coming and attending on here. We understand and appreciate the difficulty of building in the CSU environment, 60-year-old campuses, in many cases infrastructure that predates that by multiple decades on there. It's always tough. But going forward without doing an adequate underground investigation is flat out crazy. And in the last year, that cost us way over $1 million. The cost of having done a proper investigation would have been trivial compared to the exposures we've gone into. So we strongly encourage you to take advantage of the resource and do whatever is necessary for the projects. And in the broader sense, really completing the campus utility mapping, working our way out of just a project by project situation, but into actually building up our good formal GIS system so that we understand exactly what we've got everywhere on a campus. And that should be the long-term goal for everybody on that. And thanks for attending and taking the first steps on it. Good luck, and call us if you have any questions or need any help.
Yeah, and feel free to reach out to the campuses that McCarthy said that they worked with before, and ask them for their feedback. See if they recommend. Did they get value out of the services? Was there some services that they got value out of and other ones that they don't? And contact those campuses and get that candid feedback before kind of making those decisions. But regardless of who you go with or what contract you use, just make sure that this is something that's budgeted and included. And I think we're going to be working on adding this as a line on the 2.7 as well, just to help the people that are putting together the budget to make sure that money is allocated. So, Matthew, any final words?
Kevin, I really appreciate you helping set this up. I really appreciate everyone being here today. I just dropped my email and phone number into the chat. And so if anybody wants to follow up with any questions, feel free. And then I'll be working to follow up directly as well, just to stay in touch and see if there's anything we can help you with along the way.
All right. With that, thank you, everybody. And everyone have a great night.